evening. I'm Leanne Sanders. Welcome to APTN National News Weekend. A human rights tribunal hearing for day school survivors continues in Burns Lake, British Columbia. Survivors and witnesses have been testifying about alleged abuses they suffered at Immaculata Day School. APTN's Lee Wilson reports.
The Canadian Human Rights Tribunal hearing is taking place in Burns Lake in northern BC for 2 weeks. The tribunal is looking at allegations that the Prince George RCMP mishandled the 2012 investigation into alleged historic abuses from 6 survivors at the Catholic-run Immaculata Day School. Leaders from Lake Babine Nation and Chilkasco Nation, or Burns Lake Band, arrived for the opening ceremony earlier this week. It's the first tribunal hearing held outside of Ottawa. Lake Babine Nation Chief Murphy Abraham shared he was a student in Immaculata and thanked those in attendance for listening to the difficult testimony.
Trying times here today, to sit and discuss and to interview some of the witnesses that have gone through the day school system.
3 of the 6 day school survivors who made the 2013 complaint against the RCMP have passed away. Dorothy Williams, one of the original survivors, testified this week. She could not hold back tears as leaders spoke of survivors finally being heard. The survivors allege the police did not take their case seriously because they were Indigenous. It is an allegation that the RCMP has denied. Due to a 2022 publication ban granted by the tribunal in federal court, an alleged abuser can only be referred to as AB.
And here used to be the building, the school part.
Pius Charlie is a member of Chilkasco Nation, or Burns Lake Band. He attended the Immaculata Day School as a student and remembered where it stood before a fire.
Immaculata Catholic Church, which used to be Immaculata School way back in the 70s, and this is where everybody had to go to school for the day school situation.
Charlie is a witness scheduled to testify at the tribunal. He says the former school is now a church. The Immaculata Day School was closed in 1986. Since the late 1800s, more than 200,000 children were forced into church-run day schools across Canada, which aimed to assimilate Indigenous children into colonial society. The in-person part of the tribunal in Burns Lake will wrap up next week, and then it will go virtual, as it is expected to take 10 weeks. Lee Wilson, APTN National News, Burns Lake.
APTN's online reporter Kathleen Martins is covering the tribunal. Dennis Ward spoke to her earlier.
Kathleen, good to see you. Journalist Laura Robinson took the stand yesterday and today. Can you tell us a bit about what she had to say?
Well, yesterday Laura laid out how many trips she's made here to northern BC from her home in Ontario to meet with survivors of the Immaculata Elementary Catholic Day School, and how the genesis of the story, how it came together, how she learned about the survivors up here, and then how she was able to gather their story. Anyone who's covered stories speaking to people from remote First Nations knows they don't always have phones, vehicles, computers, Wi-Fi. That was very much the case here for Laura 10 years ago. It was 2012 when she first received a tip that brought her up here. And in the time she did subsequent visits, at one point a note was slipped under her hotel room door. She'd received unsolicited emails. Someone would stop her in the street and say, "Oh, you need to go to the Red Apple Clearance Center and talk to this woman," or, my cousin. These are close-knit communities who a lot of them went to school together. They know what happened there. But when you're coming in as an outsider, you don't know them or how to necessarily get a hold of them. So she laid that out for the Human Rights Tribunal.
And now, of course, RCMP lawyers cross-examined her. How did that go?
Yeah, that's happening today as we speak. Really interesting. They've asked, have she been able to verify these claims? He says, well, abuse, it's not always public. some of it happened in front of the other students, physical abuse, but the two survivors who've been on the witness stand so far have said they were taken to a boiler room, the furnace room, where there was a lot of noise, and it would drown out their screams when they were hit with straps or rulers or a pointer stick. So, you know, she wasn't able to say that she could independently verify survivors' claims of abuse. The Mounties lawyer also asked, well, when you first went up to Burns Lake Band Office, over 30 people were waiting there to meet with you. You know, could they collude on their stories? Could they compare their stories? And she had a really great reply that I want to share with you. She said they could mingle and talk for the last 50 years. So, you know, in her defense, she's like, these are not stories that were created for my benefit. These are their experiences at day school, and they shared them with me. Sure, a lot of them were similar because they had similar teachers and similar experiences.
The end of week 1 is nearing here. There's another week still. What's coming up next week?
Next week will be more witnesses for the survivors' case. They you know, have alleged that the RCMP did somewhat of a half-hearted job investigating their complaints that a teacher was racist and physically abused them when they were in day school 50 years ago. One of the interesting witnesses, or one of the more interesting witnesses, sounds like a police officer who investigated the Graham James sexual abuse case, a junior hockey coach involving some hockey players, and how he looked into that and figured out what happened enough that charges could be laid. So that'll be interesting.
Kathleen, we'll have to leave it there, but again, thanks for the work you're doing up there. Glad you're there, and we'll talk to you soon.
Okay, thanks, Dennis.
Family and friends of a 31-year-old Winnipeg man who died after taking tainted drugs in the Paw, Manitoba, held a 4-day spiritual fire for him. The fire is out now, and funeral plans are in the works. Harlan Foray's father, Joseph, is hoping that his son's death will spark change.
I take comfort in knowing that his journey was well lit. You know, having the music, the drum playing on a constant, knowing that he had the songs of our ancestors to listen to as he walked to the other side.
Joe Foray has placed the final log on a sacred fire for his son Harlan, who overdosed in the Paw after using drugs tainted with fentanyl. 6 other people also took the tainted drugs, but recovered. RCMP in the Paw put out a warning about the drugs, but that came too late for Harlan. Foray says Harlan was not an addict, something many assumed on hearing he'd overdosed. While there's been a dramatic increase in overdose deaths in Manitoba in the last number of years, Foray says the numbers are just part of the story.
I think it was 467 deaths last year, double from 2019, well, more than double from 2019. But those numbers don't tell the whole story. You know, those numbers don't tell us how many of those were one and done, trying it for the first time.
Foray believes there should be harsher penalties for those trafficking in fentanyl.
I think mandatory sentencing needs to be put in place. We need to make this as unattractive as possible to sell this drug. I know they have mandatory sentencing for cocaine, which doesn't probably kill as many people as fentanyl does.
Harlan Foray's Indigenous name was Singing Red Bear, and Joe hopes his son's death will carry the message far that with fentanyl, one time may be too many.
I think now it's time for that voice that he left us behind with to sing loudly, to educate others that it's okay to say no thanks, and we need to start saying no thanks.
The funeral for Harlan Foray is this Saturday. The casket of the Winnipeg Jets fan will bear a custom star blanket with the team's logo. For Joe, he hopes people will remember his son, not for the way he died, but for how he lived.
I'm very proud of my son. He was a really good man, and he didn't deserve this.
Leanne Sanders, APTN National News, Winnipeg. An update from Harlan Foray's family. His funeral has been postponed. No charges will be laid in the near-fatal injury to then 18-year-old Pacey Dumas by an Edmonton police officer in 2020. On Friday, the family gave their reaction. APTN's Chris Stewart has more.
It was a brutal kick.
We have a 240-pound police officer with a carbine in his hand, and there's a young 90-pound Indigenous male, and the only way that they can subdue him is kick him soccer style in the head. It doesn't make sense. And there are independent witnesses, but yet they won't take him to trial.
Criminal defense lawyer Richard Maristy says that the Edmonton police officer involved should be charged after he kicked then 18-year-old Pacey Dumas in the head during a 2020 incident. The kick sent Dumas to the hospital for 9 days. Part of his skull was removed to reduce pressure in his brain. He now has a metal implant. His life changed forever. But even though the Alberta Serious Incident Response Team, also known as ACERT, found that Constable Ben Todd committed offenses, the Alberta Crown Prosecution declined to charge him. The ACER final report details how Todd's actions showed a shocking lack of judgment and disregard of the life of Pacey Dumas. Officers were responding to reports of a fight and possession of a knife. Both Pacey and his brother Blair voluntarily left their house and were ordered to go prone on the ground. Pacey was ordered to crawl towards Officer Ben Todd. The officer says he believed Pacey was reaching into his pocket to grab a knife. In the report, he says he told Dumas to stop moving his hands or he would get kicked in the face. In the report, the officer says he felt threatened for his safety and kicked Pacey Dumas in the head. On Friday, Edmonton Police Chief Dale McPhee told media that Officer Todd is suspended with pay and an investigation is ongoing.
If your safety is in threat and your potential loss of life, you're going to do whatever it takes, right? And then it works backwards from there. So till we actually analyze that from a perspective of policy and or the actions taken and make those decisions, the only thing that we don't look at now is the criminal part, but we look at the employment part and everything in between that, and that's what we, our assurances to you is that we will do.
And there ought to be
At a press conference, the family's lawyer says incidents like this are not a one-time mistake. The family is suing the police chief and officers involved for over $500,000.
It is unfortunate that there is and always will be officers within any police organization that somehow lose their judgment or commitment to the limits of their power and authority. And unfortunately, those officers put all other good officers at risk every day.
Dumas's aunt, Leanne Ward, says that Pacey has changed since the incident.
And he hasn't been the same. He struggles to, live day to day, to go do just normal activities that we could do. Walking into the store, to feel safe, to be okay. He doesn't feel that. And it's hard, because now he has a younger one. He has a baby that he's trying to be there for.
Dumas has lost his brother Blair from suicide. He says he needs anxiety medication now and is afraid of the police.
If I see a police vehicle, it gives me anxiety, or if I just see an officer walking by, because what they did to me, of course I'm not going to trust them.
Chris Stewart, APTN National News, Edmonton.
Alberta's Crown Prosecution Service has not responded to our requests for an interview. The family of an 8-year-old girl had their worst fears realized this week as a report of a missing Indigenous girl turned to tragedy. According to an autopsy by the Edmonton Medical Examiner, the cause of death was blunt impact trauma, and it is a homicide. APTN's Daniel Pardy has more.
The Edmonton Police Service worked with the RCMP to locate the remains of a young girl on Samson Cree Nation in Musketcheese, about 85 kilometers outside of Edmonton on Saturday. The girl was missing from Edmonton since March 22nd. The girl and her family cannot be named under a publication ban. The family told APTN News that they are working to get the publication ban lifted. The child's aunt and grandmother spoke to APTN. They said it was difficult to get information from the police about what was happening throughout the ordeal. They have also told us they feel shocked and broken at this horrific turn of events. A 27-year-old woman has been accused of first-degree murder and committing an indignity to a body, and a 66-year-old man and 25-year-old man are accused of accessory to first-degree murder and an indignity to a body. All of the charges are from the Edmonton Police. None of the charges have been proven in court. In the early evening of April 24th, 2023, Edmonton Police Service did a wellness check at the house of a 27-year-old woman who had been caring for the 8-year-old girl. Due to suspicious circumstances, police began a homicide investigation. EPS said that they worked with the RCMP and other agency partners to search for the young girl's remains. The Edmonton Police Service have said that all of the accused were known to the girl. The same evening her remains were discovered, there was over 100 people at a rally supporting the family on Saturday. Danielle Pardy, APTN National News, Edmonton.
Thunder Bay Police have released dramatic video of a shootout that happened in the middle of the day on Tuesday. The video was released as police announced that a Toronto man has been charged with attempted murder in the incident. The video shows gunfire being exchanged between numerous parties before they flee. A responding officer later noticed a suspect matching the description provided by witnesses. He fled from police on foot, but a male suspect was soon arrested. Officers located a quantity of crack cocaine and a handgun in the man's possession. 20-year-old Iverson Thomas of Toronto is charged with attempted murder, possession of cocaine for the purpose of trafficking, and a handful of other firearms-related charges. Police have since announced the arrest of a second suspect. 36-year-old Desiree Dawn Barber of Thunder Bay is charged with attempted murder and is being held in custody. Other suspects are still being sought by police. We have to take a short break, but we'll tell you about how the fire season is quickly heating up. Back after this. Welcome back. The Trudeau government has launched a formal investigation into the Curl oil sands mine in northern Alberta. This comes in the wake of a tailings pond spill that has been affecting local Indigenous communities for close to a year. The announcement was made by Environment Minister Stephen Guilbeault at a press conference in Ottawa on Thursday. Even though the leak of contaminated water happened in May of last year, Imperial Oil did not notify local Indigenous communities of the spill until February of this year. Alberta Liberal MP Randy Boissonneau said the federal government continues to be disappointed in how the company handled the situation.
When we have an incident like Imperial Oil and tailings ponds that are not accounted for and that communities are not informed, it's simply unacceptable. And Imperial Oil CEO did not acquit himself well at committee. In fact, they did themselves no favors. And so when I hear people in Alberta saying we want answers, we want solutions, we want a real plan, I stand with those peoples. It's not fair and it's unjust for Indigenous communities that are living downstream to have questions about their drinking water table and, quite frankly, the health of the natural environment.
It is unfortunately that time of year again, fire season. Wildfires in Alberta have forced thousands of people to evacuate, and the unseasonably hot, dry weather is being blamed. In northwestern Saskatchewan, Clearwater River Dene Nation also had a sleepless night on Wednesday as a wildfire near that community prompted an evacuation order. According to local media reports, the fire crossed the only highway into the community on Wednesday night, prompting the evacuation. Dozens more were evacuated from La Loche on Friday. Meantime, separate fires are being fought at Moosomin and Soto First Nations just north of the Battlefords. There's word those fires have been contained. Parks Canada also had a planned fire go out of control next to the popular tourist town of Banff. Parks Canada says shifting high winds were to blame. Residents and tourists were temporarily evacuated until the fire was brought under control Wednesday evening. And in northern Alberta, the Little Red River Cree Nation are evacuating everyone as a precaution as an out-of-control wildfire rages 6 kilometers north of their home. A nonprofit emergency services organization in British Columbia says they're equipped to protect Indigenous communities across that province. Every year, the First Nations Emergency Services Society, or FNES, trains nearly 2,000 First Nations people for various roles in fire safety. In this video from 2022, crews from across the province competed in the Indigenous Firefighters competition. The next competition is set for June. From training to providing equipment, FNES specializes in helping Indigenous communities overcome any barriers that may prevent them from accessing emergency services. Brendan Mercer says FNES works with over 200 communities.
Well over 1,500 different certificates have been printed out for band members in the last little while. If another community needs resources in the middle of a wildfire season, well, then we know who to call from an adjacent community. Yeah, just really trying to improve emergency management for Indigenous people, because again, it's just so fragmented in BC and across Canada too, to be honest. There's enough reports that say emergency management's in a pretty bad place. So
we have to take another short break, but when we come back, we'll have a look at Disney's live-action remake of Peter Pan and Wendy and meet the Cree actress from Alberta starring in the movie. A more culturally sensitive remake of Disney's Peter Pan and Wendy debuted on Disney Plus this week. The live-action movie does away with the original animated film's racist song and harmful stereotypes of Indigenous people. Cree consultants and actress Alyssa Wapanatak, who plays warrior princess Tiger Lily, helped the film stay true to Cree culture and language. Wapanatak is a member of the Big Stone Cree Nation near Fort McMurray, Alberta. She portrays Tiger Lily as strong and wise and hopes young Indigenous girls see a role model.
Well, I hope for them that they could see it as a really inspiring character to look up to in their lives and see that they are capable of being smart and intuitive and brave women and girls. And I really hope that they take that away from it, because Tiger Lily is really a badass, and I think everybody needs a little bit of that in their life sometimes.
That's all we have for you tonight on this edition of APTN National News Weekend. If you want to see these stories and more from the week that was, head to aptnnews.ca. I'm Leanne Sanders. Thanks for joining us.